welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. It's a very rainy, horrible day in London, but this is going to make it so much better. We have Rebecca Ross in today to talk about Wild Reverence. Hi Rebecca, how's it going?
It's going great.
Good.
I'm very happy to be here.
Good. Nothing beats the blues of horrible weather and an amazing book. So yes, we're all up from here. So
Yes, and I actually don't mind the rain too much, and this is my first time in London, so I feel like I'm getting the full London experience. I forgot an umbrella, so thankfully someone gave me an umbrella because I definitely need an umbrella around here.
I suppose at least you weren't here. So last week there were tube strikes and everything, which was manic, and a lot of people having to walk home and getting on and off buses was chaotic. That is the truth.
Okay. Well, I barely missed that.
You're probably glad you missed that. So we're here to discuss your brand new book. So what can you tell us, kind of, I suppose, spoiler free for people at home who haven't read it yet?
Yes, so Wild Reverence, it's set in the same world as Divine Rivals. It's set 600 years before, so I really wanted to use this book as a way to take readers back in time when all the gods were very much alive and magic was thriving in the world. So sometimes readers ask me, is Iris and Roman in this book? And no, they're not, because they're not born yet. But I think you will still see traces, because I had a lot of readers ask me, where does the magic from the typewriters come from in Divine Rivals? And can we see more about the gods? I said, yes. But I'm going to need a whole nother book to do it. So this book focuses on a goddess named Matilda, and she is the herald of the gods, so she can carry messages between all the realms, the skywards, the mortal realm, the underlings below. And this book really is about her, and one day Death has a letter that she wants Matilda to deliver to this mortal man that's about to die, that Death doesn't want to die. And that man just so happens to be somebody that Matilda knew in childhood. They were childhood friends. And so many years have passed since they've talked. So Matilda finds herself in a race against time to save him and going to aid him in his time of need. But obviously he doesn't care too much for the gods. So he's kind of changed a lot over the years they've been separated. So it's really a story about the two of them, their love story, their individual stories as well. And yeah, I really wanted it just to be really a standalone you could read without having read Divine Rivals, because I get asked that a lot too. Do I need to read Divine Rivals first? No, you can actually read this one first if you want, because it is its own fully contained story. But if you do read it, you will be set up to read Divine Rivals knowing all this backstory, right? But if you have read Divine Rivals first, you are going to pick up on a few things in this book, because I did write it in such a way where I left crumbs for readers that I think they will find very impactful and meaningful.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely a few interesting, again, no spoilers for anyone at home, but just a few moments.
Yes, which I wanted readers to experience that feeling.
Very fun. So Matilda is such an interesting character, because she kind of starts off she's very quiet, very unassuming, and very much like the people around her, the other kind of gods and goddesses. They almost forget she's there until they need to kind of call upon her.
Yes.
So where did that character come from for you, and did she change much as the writing process was for you?
Yeah, so I do tend to favor quieter characters, and I think with Matilda, I wanted her to really be regarded as not necessarily very powerful in the beginning. So she is kind of people look at her and underestimate her a lot, which I think sometimes happens to a lot of women. And in this world, a god's magic corresponds to how many points that they have in their constellation. So every god is born with a constellation, and it kind of settles them in the lower court, the mid court, the upper court. So Matilda is in the mid court. And also in this world, gods can kill to steal power, so they can kind of ascend the courts by being very ruthless. So Matilda has never really been driven to steal magic. But she is kind of in this middle ground where she still has to be very careful. You can't really trust anybody. And so I think with her, it's interesting, when I first wrote this book, it was in third person. So very similar in tone to Divine Rivals, which was written in third person with Iris and Roman's perspectives, and that's how this first draft was as well. And so I wrote the whole book in third person, and I thought it was good, but I was there's still something missing here. I'm not quite pulling all the threads together that I want. And I think really it kind of came down to how I felt about Matilda in the end, because I thought something is missing in her arc, and I'm not sure what it is. but I had to turn the book in because I was like, due to my editor. So she read it, and this first draft was like 150,000 words. So it was a pretty big draft. And my editor read it. We were having a chat about like talking about developmental edits, and I was like, oh, I think I know what's wrong. And so I had to break the news to my editor, and I was like, I think I need to rewrite the book, and I need to rewrite it in first person. And I think that will help me find what exactly is missing and help me pull these threads that I need to pull tighter. And she was just looked at me like, okay, like, why don't you rewrite the first chapter and send it to me? I'll read it, and then we'll go from there. So I was like, okay, well, I think I even started the first draft in the wrong place. So I was like, I had to open up a new Word document. I'm thinking, where do I start the story? If I'm changing it to first person, like, where does the story start? And it's interesting that I had a line come to me, and it was, once long ago, I thought the god of war was my father, but only because he was the first to hold me in his arms after I was born. And I had this very striking image of this big, burly god of war, which I love the God of War franchise. Like, I love Kratos. So I kind of had like a Kratos envisioning, like holding like a very like small, weak, but cute little baby goddess. And the God of War wasn't even in the first draft either, Bade. And I think that was what I was really missing, because he plays such an important role in Matilda's entire emotional arc. But it's really hard. Like, some readers who've read this cannot believe Bade wasn't in it in the first draft. So I think just changing it to first person, starting it off as if Matilda is really beginning at the very beginning of her life, it completely changed the book. And that's when I feel like I really found her and I really understood her so much better. And yeah, I had to rewrite the whole book like in a pretty short amount of time, which was tough, but I think I unlocked something and I was looking for. So once I had it, I was like, oh, okay, like the words started coming a lot easier. Like, the first draft was really hard, and then the second draft was like, okay, I know her really well by now. And I really could explore a lot more of the depths of her character, because it felt so much more intimate, because she is telling her story.
And I'm very glad that Bade is in it, because that's one of my kind of favourite relationships between the two of them, because you kind of feel very early on that she's kind of on her own almost, and she's having to learn very quickly how the politics work of the world, but it kind of feels that there's an honesty to Bade in a way.
Yeah, so he is like kind of like steps up as a father role, and he's protecting her and he's trying to train her to toughen her up so she can defend herself. And so yeah, it's so funny. A lot of readers like do love him, and I never really expected that they would, but they are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like he wasn't in the first draft. So, but yeah, I'm very glad readers, they do like Bade, because I do like Bade a lot too, and he has his own arc that he also goes through.
And he did. It's funny you say about the Kratos thing, because when I was reading it, and my partner's a huge fan of God of War, and I was just like, oh my god, it's kind of like, and he was just like, oh, I might read that one.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So also about Matilda, which is so interesting, is always when you're reading kind of books, whether it's kind of made up mythologies or taking from kind of folklore, fairy tale, that there's something about the gods that's kind of otherworldly, but Matilda feels very human, which is again a really kind of interesting thing. Was that a kind of conscious thing that you were doing to kind of make her, I don't know, more relatable?
Yeah, I probably did that without really realizing I did that, because I did want readers to be able to relate to her. And it was interesting writing from an immortal goddess's POV, because it is like, what does time feel like to her? What do relationships feel like to her? It's like very different than how, if for instance, writing Iris and Divine Rivals, where everything feels like very desperate, and you have time against you, and death could happen any moment, and just just so she was very interesting, really, to delve into. But I will say, I think and again, in the first draft, Vincent and Matilda did not know each other as children, so that really changed their whole arc when I brought that aspect in, where I have Vincent dreaming of her. He's this boy having nightmares, and she comes into his dreams and helps him through it, so they become friends through dreams. And I think her having that interaction with Vincent softens her from the beginning, because already she is kind of viewing mortals as someone to protect, someone to love, very good people, whereas the other gods kind of view them as very disposable, or they're just there for me, to worship me. And so from the beginning, I think it's Vincent that really they have this connection that really sets them on a very different trajectory than their counterparts.
Yes, yeah, and the time lapse that kind of comes quite early on is definitely has such an impact, especially on his character, because he comes back kind of I don't know, a grown man who's kind of seen some stuff.
So I love stuff like that in stories though, where you do see, because all of Act 1 they are children, so it's a very different type of book that I've written, because there are a couple time lapses. So, but I wanted to show them as when they're very innocent still, and somewhat naive, and still very trusting, and have like faith and hope in the world, you know, and then terrible things happen. There is a time lapse, but then like what happens when they come back together and they're older and they've both been through some things. It made it so much more interesting to write than that first draft.
And coming back as well to you touched on before, the magic system, and the idea of not only can they kill for, you know, to attain kind of a higher place in the hierarchy, as it were, but they can also kind of lend each other magic, which is also quite interesting. It's just, I just love the politics of it all.
Yeah, I'm glad. I feel like I had a really good time. Again, like having the opportunity to dive a lot deeper into like the gods and goddesses was a lot of fun, and how it was like with their politics, and yes, I really enjoyed it.
Have you always had kind of that fascination with mythology and with gods and goddesses? Because as you mentioned, obviously there are elements of it in obviously Divine Rivals, and probably in your other works as well. There's kind of you know, that.
I think it is interesting. I think like most of us have, like in high school, like we read a lot of Greek myths, and so I do think they do leave quite an impression on a lot of us. I know, like for me too, I remember like the first time I read the myth of Cupid and Psyche, I thought that was such an interesting myth. And then I read a lot of retellings, so I read C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces, which is a retelling of that myth. But even East of the Sun, West of the Moon is like another with the polar bear, and it's just like really cool to see like how like other like places and authors have seen and kind of reworked these myths. So I think they are very like integral to us as people. But I do love to also let my imagination go and kind of create my own myths. So another book I did that with is Sisters of Sword and Song, which was my third YA book that published. And it's very much inspired by ancient Greece, and I have another kind of myths that I weave into the book, and gods and goddesses, and I think I just really enjoy doing that because it does keep kind of coming up in my works. Yeah,
I mean, there is something about, and especially of late, there seems to be this kind of reclaiming of mythology, which is, I'm very much enjoying different kind of characters and different retellings, and some of those quieter voices finally kind of getting seen.
Yes.
I did write in my notes about, as I was reading, and obviously later on kind of touching on the Orpheus myth, I did write Hades Town. And
I have not seen Hades Town, but I need to. This is like the third or fourth time it's been recommended to me, so like I have got to see that.
Yes, yeah. When you get some downtime, then yeah, it's phenomenal as well.
Okay, well, it's on
my list. So coming to, I was going to say, obviously, how wonderful your prose and how just immersive it is from the start. It's a very slow book, but very purposefully that way. How has kind of your writing process changed, and do you kind of, from, you know, when you were first kind of writing, and even, you know, kind of through, say, lockdown, I know that obviously a lot of people kind of struggled with the creative process during lockdown. How has your writing process changed?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've sold my first traditional book deal back in 2015, and that book came out in 2018, so I've been publishing since 2018, and so it is really interesting to watch my evolution as a writer, because I do think, number one, I've gotten a lot better at revising myself, just because I've worked with a couple editors by now that I really have learned like kind of where my weak points are in the draft. But I've always appreciated stories that are beautifully told. As a reader, like I want to be emotionally devastated. I want to feel all the things when I'm reading. I love it when a plot can take me by surprise. I want characters that I would follow to the ends of the earth for. But I also do want beautiful writing. So I think looking at what I like as a reader is what I try to recreate in a book. So I always write books that I want to read. And for instance, like my 2020 book that I wrote, because I found it really hard to write during 2020. I went for maybe like 11 months not writing anything new. And that's when I was like, okay, it's time for me to sit down and write, because it's been too long. And I've just been really sad and just overwhelmed by the world. And that's when I wrote Divine Rivals. And I think it was like, I wanted to write something about two people falling in love and make it very unapologetically romantic, right? So it's interesting, like that's the book that came out of that season of time. But I write for young adults and adults. So this book is technically new adult, so it gets shelved over on the adult shelf. And I do think there's a little bit of difference where I can take my time with an adult book, and the same with River Enchanted and Fire Endless or my other adult novels. They just have a different tone and mood about them. They are a little bit slower with like YA. I'm really like focusing on pacing, trying to hook teen readers in and keep them turning the pages. So I think I can just really, at this point in time, appreciate really writing for two different audiences now. But yes, this book, like I said, it was a challenge, but I feel like every book I write, I want to learn something more. I want to grow a little bit more. So I'm always kind of like, okay, what can I do next to really grow and challenge myself? So this book definitely did that for me. So again, with the whole story of me writing it once and then literally opening a new document and writing it again, you know, making it better. So yeah, I do think you can kind of see my journey. I hope that I get a little bit better with every book that I write.
And it's quite interesting you say about obviously Divine Rivals in regards to kind of lockdown and stuff, because I think even that whole idea of writing letters and stuff, suddenly people were having to find new ways of kind of keeping in touch.
Yeah.
And, you know, particularly like I've got elderly parents, so it's just like they're not that tech savvy. So it's not like you can just, you know, call or whatever. So how are you kind of...
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Probably, kind of that feeling of, you know, distance being between people and like words still connecting us and like letters. Yeah, that kind of that very, bring it back that nostalgic sense of that too. But that's a good point, because we were like everyone, you couldn't see people and it felt very isolating. Yeah,
and I think that there is something even now to getting a letter or a card that feels, I don't know, more special, like more kind of thought about than obviously a bill.
Yeah, no, I do love that too, especially when it's like in someone's handwriting. Like I still have a lot of like birthday cards from my grandparents just because it has their handwriting in it. And it's like, oh, that's just like so precious to me. It's priceless.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think I've got some boxes of, you know, like old postcards, and you know, even when you had like a pen pal at school.
Yeah, I used to do pen pal too.
Yeah. It'd be weird if you ever met. Can you imagine? Like,
I know.
30 years later. It's just like, I wouldn't know where to start.
I know.
So you mentioned before about being a fan of God of War, and I'm a huge gamer, so we're gonna have to get into this. Do you find that kind of your love of games influences your writing, and what other kind of games have really kind of spoken to you?
Yeah, so my favorite thing to do when I turn a book in on deadline, because usually it's like deadline, you're working a ton, I don't have time really to do anything fun because I have to, as soon as I turn it in, I'm like, all right, if I can afford to do this, like the next day I will just play video games all day and stay in my pajamas, not leave the house. And that's like literally my way of decompressing and really rewarding myself for like getting my stuff done. But I find that it helps me, and reading does this too, but I think something with video games, because it's very visual, and then you have like the beautiful music, and then you have I always like the games that are very like story driven, so like a really good story to follow. I feel like it just hits like all these things in my brain that really refills my own creative well, because usually at the end of a deadline, or not, maybe sometimes even in the process of drafting, you can start feeling like really worn down by it, like you know, it's not necessarily the most fun time drafting sometimes. But I do think there is something about video games that does almost like, I don't know, it helps for me to get lost in someone else's world, and it's fully immersive too. So I think that's why I gravitate so much to video games. But yeah, I love the God of War. That one's probably one of my favorites, because I just love just the trope of like the big burly gruff man traveling with a small adorable child. So that's like one of my favorite things, and I just was, again, love the whole story in God of War. And I actually listened to a lot of the soundtrack, just so beautiful. Like I've listened to the soundtracks while I write. I also of course love Skyrim. That was probably one of the first ones I really like played all the way through. I also really love Dragon Age, so I'm almost done with Dragon Age Veilguard. I've kind of delayed ending it, because I don't want it to end. It's like, oh, it's about to be over, I'm about to hit the final set everything in motion where the end of the story hits. And also I like The Witcher 3. I played that one all the way through, and I honestly, like, the very last scene had, like, brought me to tears. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, it was just, I don't know, I think there's something, you get so invested and you feel really drawn into a story. So yeah, I love them. I feel like they really do help me decompress from my own work, help me escape, like really fully pull me out of my own head, because sometimes I need that, like, let me get lost in someone else's world.
There is something ultimately, because I find the same thing, like, you know, quite a stressful job at times, and we've got Comic-Con coming up, so that's always like a bit of a crazy time. So yeah, to have kind of that world that you get lost in. I'm just finishing off Yakuza Infinite Wealth, and it's just so interesting because you have the idea of Japan and the dissolution of the Yakuza, and kind of where do all these people go who have been in the Yakuza from an early age, who, you know, have always kind of, I suppose, lived in the shadows, and now it's just like, okay, you got to go get a day job and stuff, and it's just like
yeah, that's really interesting.
How's that work? It's not gonna work. I don't know, but you get so, yeah, it does make you think about the world differently, and when you're really kind of immersed in a game. And there is something very kind of game/filmic about your writing. So yeah, it definitely kind of, there's like a rhythm to it, and you just kind of get lost.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that.
So with the, just coming back to the characters, kind of with those multi POVs and kind of that, you know, the kind of time lapse and things like that, was it easy to kind of keep track of who was where and who was doing what, or did you find your characters kind of running away from you?
You know, it was easier to keep track than I thought it would, because sometimes there are moments where it's like, oh, I need like really a map of who is where, when. And it might have been just because I wrote the story once and then I was going back, and there's some scenes that were still very similar. So I've had people ask, oh, well, didn't you just copy and paste from, I was like, no, I couldn't do that. Like, I still literally just wanted to look at a fresh Word document and not bring in the old draft. But there were still scenes, and I will say the ending of this book, the second draft, did change a little bit. Like, it was way more emotional than it was the first time. So I do think, like, I hold a lot in my head, which is probably not the best thing, but I also, every book I work on, I have a journal. So sometimes I will just like scribble things down, try not to like make sure I'm like keeping things straight, because it is like, this is it's the longest book I've ever written. It spans a lot of time, and there are a lot of characters involved, even if it's just Matilda and Vincent narrating. So yeah, sometimes I do have to like make sure I keep stuff written down, because it's like, oh, I'll remember. It's like, no, you won't. Like, write it down, because then your head just is so full of thoughts, and then when you're going through revisions too, it can get really confusing.
Do you ever go back and read your kind of old notebooks from other books and just say,
sometimes
why did I not do that thing? Or...
Yeah, sometimes I do. The fun one to look back on was really my Divine Rivals notebook. You can see I did this exercise in the beginning of that notebook where I was just writing down like really like beautiful descriptions, or descriptions that kind of clashed with each other, just to make it feel like, I don't know, very visceral. And then I ended up writing down a line, and it was a girl who writes letters to her missing brother and the boy who reads them. And that line stopped me in my tracks. I was like, well, who is this girl? Why is her brother missing? Who is this boy who's reading the letters? How are the letters getting magically transported? And so you see, if you start flipping through the page, you start seeing me figure things out. And as I start writing the book too, I discovered a lot of it. But there's still like snippets of banter, like I would see coming that I hadn't reached that scene yet, so I'd write it down, and it's still in the book. Like, it made it in the book. That's how like striking it was in the moment. So that one is, I actually did look through that journal recently, and it was like really cool just to see the story evolve and how my thoughts were like, oh, I think this is how it's going to end. And it was like, oh no, it's going to end this way. So it is really neat. Yeah. To have like the roadmap of like how the book came to be.
Yes, yeah. And you could always as well, a few authors have been doing this recently where it's, say, the anniversary of a book. So and it's always a bit crazy when it's like 20 years of so-and-so, you remember when it first came out. But they're doing it with author notes, which I find so interesting. And we had, I think it was Paul Tremblay with Horror Movie that had like notes that he'd made on the and I was just like, that's so interesting to see your process and like how you got there.
Yeah, I also love seeing where authors work, like their desks, because I find it's usually like really cool and creative, or even if it is just like literally a desk, like the things you have on the desk with you, I find so fascinating.
That is quite interesting. What are your rituals, like what's on your desk?
So I like to write first thing in the morning. So like as soon as I wake up, so I make myself a cup of coffee and I'll like my water, and I'll go sit at my desk. And it's been quite a few years, but I've created my office to look like as soon as I walk in, it just is already inspiring me, just because of the way, like the things I have hanging on the wall and all my books on the shelf, and it just has this very like almost like dark academia feel to it that I've like slowly like been trying to like make again, like when I walk in, it has that mood. I typically will just write at my desk, but I like to have a lot of drinks. So then like, I'll go get a second cup of coffee, and then I'll get this, and before like the end of the day, it'll be like glasses and cups like all over my desk. But then of course I have like my journal too. So journal, bunch of drinks. That's really all I need. And then my dog is typically like sleeping at my feet.
That sounds a perfect setup.
Yeah, so that's nice.
Yeah, very nice. And so coming towards the end of our interview, so what are you working on now, if you're allowed to give us a news?
So I'm working on my next adult fantasy. So it's funny, I sold this book 2 years ago. So September 2023. So I've been sitting on this idea for a long time that I've been really anxious to write, or just like very excited to write. I sold it literally off like a 1-page pitch. But I had written the first page, so I kind of knew like my characters, and I was very intrigued by them. But then I decided to prioritize Wild Reverence. So like, okay, this idea is going to have to get bumped, but now it's time. So I am currently drafting that book. It has a very interesting structure where it's like a story within a story, which I've always wanted to write. And again, that's a new challenge for me. So the structure is a little bit different than what I'm used to, but I'm really enjoying writing it. It won't be coming out next year, so next year is like an off year for me. I'll just be writing, revising. So this next adult book will be publishing, hopefully, like fingers crossed that everything goes well, in 2027.
Okay.
But hopefully, like the official announcement will be coming soon as well.
Yeah, that's exciting. Do you know how it's going to end, that story, or is it still...
Kind of, but I mean, I definitely do a lot of discovery as I write. It is a series, so right now it's set as a duology, but I would really like it to be a trilogy. So I'm kind of trying to really plan, which I'm not the best like plotter, but I think probably what I'll do is like I'll draft book 1. My goals were to write book 1 and book 2 back to back, so to have them both fully drafted. And then go through revisions with them. But I'm a little behind schedule because it's just taking me a little bit longer to write these days. But so I think like as far as the ending, I have like a very loose idea, and that's typically how I work. Like I know I'm beginning, I know all these like big emotional plot beats, and I'm like anxious to get to like I want to get to the scene, write it. A lot of times the endings like they're very fluid, so they can change while I'm like I get further in. I'm like, oh, I kind of saw it this way, but it needs to be this way, like way more impactful to write it this way. So I always just have to trust the process, which can be great and be terrifying at the same time. But that's the magic of writing.
Yes, you got this. So yeah.
You'd think with 9 books in, I would.
This is like...
Every book is different, though.
Yeah, it's very interesting. My partner's an author as well, and just I can never quite predict what's going on. I just kind of pop my head in every so often and just be like, coffee?
Yeah. Oh, that's sweet.
So yeah, I think he finds he has to work in the evenings and stuff. So he's definitely
an evening
at
writer.
Night.
Yep.
He's got to but he does gaming stuff as well. He does he writes for games as well. So
that sounds amazing.
That's kind of, I think that's almost kind of his, not fun writing as it were, but it's kind of gearing your brain in a different way. So yeah, so he can kind of I'll do that for a couple of hours, but then
that's amazing.
I need to go back and do the book.
Yeah, very, very cool.
So yeah. But I think he's locked away today. He's got to get some writing done.
Yeah. So what it's like just being adjacent
to
a writer.
no, it's like. And for the last question, so what are you currently reading, watching, and what's the we've already spoken a bit about gaming, but any other games you're excited for coming out this year?
So I am currently reading a manuscript of my critique partners. That this book hasn't been announced yet, but my critique partner, her name's Isabel Ibanez. Me and her work very closely, where we chapter swap. So as I was writing this book, I was giving her chapters of it to read. So she reads my very first draft. So she's very helpful and very integral to my storytelling, because she's great to have like for a brainstorming partner too, because she's reading it as I'm writing it. So I'm actually reading her book. I will say, since it's not announced, I will just promote the book I also read while she was working on that is about to come out that I can talk about. Graceless Heart, which is coming out in January.
Okay.
Very beautiful Renaissance fantasy, so it's absolutely wonderful. And then I'm currently watching, let me see. So I'm actually rewatching the show Younger for the third time. So I love this show because I think like Hilary Duff's in it, and I just love Hilary Duff. But it's also, are you familiar with that show, the premise?
I'm not, no.
It's basically this woman who's 40 years old, realizes she cannot find a job because she's been out of the workforce. So she decides to pose as a 20-something-year-old and goes and works as a publishing intern. So you even kind of see like publishing in New York City, which is hilarious to see how like they represent, cause some things like way off the mark, but other things are pretty accurate. So it just has like the publishing feel, which I always love. And it's just really hilarious. And then I'm currently about to finish Dragon Age Veilguard, but I have been looking for like what's my next game. I'm already thinking about it, and I've had Baldur's Gate recommended to me multiple times, so I think that's going to be my next play.
The other one would be Expedition 33.
Ooh.
It was made by a very small French studio, and it's this kind of just epic RPG in scale and scope, and it's all kind of French Renaissance-esque.
Oh, I would love that.
And you have kind of this thing called the gommage that happens once a year, and so you start off as the next gommage is going to happen, and basically you know that it's a race against time before the next age of people gets disappeared.
Oh, really cool idea.
It's so amazing. It's so epic, and the music. You know, when you actually listen to music after you finish the game, you just I'm gonna put that on my Spotify.
Good. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna definitely check that one out.
Yeah, it was exquisite. It was very, very good. The combat was, you have to kind of but God of War, you'll be fine.
Okay.
You do have to get used to like blocking and parrying.
Yes.
Which is a feat unto itself. So
okay, I will definitely check it out. Thank you for the rec.
Very good. But yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming today. And for anyone at home, there's going to be signed copies available in all 10 of our stores. And also on our website, so you can pre-order there, and if you're at Comic-Con, we'll have a little stack there as well, and hopefully see you there. But for now, next time, we will see you soon.
Yeah,
bye.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.